particularly post-COVID, I think there was this civic pride that just rose up on, I need this place. You know, if we don't have somewhere outside our door, you know, where do we go? Steve, nice to see you again.
Hello, Mary, again.
Back on the High Street Trail.
Always good to speak with you. I've seen you described as the Queen of High Streets. How did that come about?
Oh, that was a TV show. In fact, actually, the moniker Queen of Shops came about when I left Harvey Nichols. I was their creative director, and when I left, the Times wrote this piece, and it said Queen of Shops is leaving, because it was a time of real sort of transition from taking it from a loss-making store into a very profitable store, and what became a very global business. And then years later I got spotted for TV, and I did a show called Queen of Shops, which probably led me to being Queen of High Streets, because it used to, the premise of it was that I would go into failing business and turn it round. And as I was doing it over the years, I realised that the high streets were diminishing. So trying to save a shop when the high streets were diminishing and not being cared for or loved for was a really difficult thing. And that's how I got the moniker when I started to bleat on about it. And I did a white paper for the then Conservative government, which was read by Cameron, under the sort of Steve Hilton for the Big Society, which was their initiative, which I kind of liked. Yes, but that was, I think now we're talking, 2011.
So 15 odd years ago.
15 odd years ago, and at a time when that was never on any political agenda.
And now, here we still are, talking about high streets, because it is on everyone's political agenda now, because we know that the public are so angry, upset when they see the state of their high streets. So what's going wrong? Why does it matter so much to people?
Well, what went wrong is that politicians take a while to catch up with cultural resonance. And I know that sounds, I don't mean that in any way, but I think that is a truth. And, you know, and also to an extent, I think there was this kind of cultural belief that high streets wash their face. They got on with it. It was sort of, you know, it was business. Business takes care of itself. And I think it was never seen as a kind of central part to social behaviour. I don't think that was ever seen as high streets. And I think what's caught up is, and particularly post-COVID, I think there was this civic pride that just rose up on, I need this place. You know, if we don't have somewhere outside our door, you know, where do we go? And you were saying that you'd just been to Scarborough. I was at Scarborough as well, and I love travelling the country and seeing, you know, the different feelings of high streets and communities. And every time I come in, they want to show you their shops. There's this kind of pride.
Of course.
This is my home. Yeah. This is my hometown. I think in the search for sort of under the previous government, I think in that search for basically profit and capitalism when it's not done with, you know, people at its heart, we lost that. We lost it. Yeah. We lost it.
I think you pick an important word there, pride, because people want to feel pride in the place where they live. It says something about who they are as well. And I think, you know, talking to people, my own experience too, people remember 10, 15 years ago, you could go to the high street, you'd meet friends, it was buzzy, it was vibrant, but in many, many parts of the country now, it's boarded up, there's metal shutters down, there's graffiti, there's fly tipping, and people feel a real sense of loss, the world going backwards, the things that mattered to them are disappearing fast. And I think that fuels a certain anger with politics itself. Do you pick that up?
I do. I think the worry that you have as politicians is that it doesn't become this kind of nostalgic anger, because that then falls into, well, it wasn't like that when I was a kid, you know, and that can get into a really kind of negative territory, which there's a lot changed since when we were children, you know. So I think it's this, there's an anger that this has really now become an issue that we kind of let erode. And I often talk about how it started. You know, it started when the planning laws really changed for allowing building out of town for supermarkets and nows and so forth. And still, you know, sort of retail parks. I mean, like, when I hear retailers going, oh yeah, we're building a retail, but customers love that, I think, what planet are you on? You know, because that's cheaper rates. Okay, and that's why they're going there, not because customers love to go to a retail park. So I think it's the nostalgic part we have to be wary of. The nostalgic part that I always try and say, I know what you want, I know what you're remembering, was that kind of connecting, getting together. So whether you're a kid of the McDonald's era, or whether you're a kid of the, I used to meet at the Body Shop, we were with the new CEO of Body Shop, I used to meet at the Body Shop with my friends, it was amazing, or, you know, we used to go down and buy our fashion. Yes, the internet has had a massive impact on that. So when they say that, I also go, well, are you still buying from Amazon? Mm-hmm. Or are you still using that? So I think hold on to that connection and that community value piece of connection and meeting and socialising. But today it's going to be different things that we'll be putting on.
So what do you think it will look like in the future? I get your point. You know, you can't cling on to the past because the world's changing. But people want to know that the future is going to be better than the past. So what do our high streets look like in 10, 20 years' time?
Well, I don't know, it depends on how well we do here, Steve, you know, because I've been on this trail for 15 years and I would have liked to have thought we're a bit further forward, quite frankly. And I think it has to come, first of all, from real ministers understanding that this is vitally important to the well-being. Healthy towns create healthy communities, healthy businesses, where money's kept in that town. Employment is done through that. It's a really wonderful ecosystem of health. I think if I was sitting in your place now, I'd be looking at how I create destinations that you can't get online and give them breaks to get there. That's number one. So how do we put doctor's surgeries in the middle of high streets? You know, how do we put well-being places where people need in the middle of high streets? I also think, how do we really, and you know, I'm sorry Rachel, you're going to get called out here, you might edit this, but you are. I think we need to look at small businesses. I think we're going to look at a lot more that's going to be coming. We can get to come back onshore, and that comes from small businesses and entrepreneurs. How are we supporting them and creating places where they can thrive and test out ideas and really grow local businesses? And I think that's a really key important thing to say. I think we've gone through this proliferation of eating out, and that being the main bit of the high street. I think that's becoming something that's quite costly. I think too many restaurants and so forth. So I think if we're able to put the well-being and the things on the middle of high streets, that, as I said, like doctor surgeries, dentist surgeries, creches, places where people commune, then what happens often organically, that the businesses come on the back of that, you know. Right. So I always go back to the great Greek agora. Oh. You know, that's where it all started, you know. There's Socrates wandering around giving everybody a little life lesson, and someone thinks, oh great, let's sell something here.
Democratic spaces, basically.
Democratic spaces.
Where people come to meet, to socialise, but locate our public services there so that people access them. Yeah. That's your footfall, and then those people are spending money.
Yeah. Those are the new anchors.
There's new anchors. And a lot more people work at home now, some of the week anyway. So maybe co-working spaces. There must be issues around isolation for people that are stuck in the house an awful lot on their own. Does that work?
I think that's a really big issue that we've had to deal with, I think, and the well-being of particularly of young generations. And I've got two kids. One of my child just came out of university and their first job was working from home, and it really had impact. You know, I thought this isn't how you should be working. You know, not full time, but there's other people who want to work at home, got young kids, and it works for them. When you've got people working from home, there's a huge opportunity for them to be using the high street more. They're going to be there. Instead of, you know, if you're down at Canary Wharf and you've got to pop out and have your lunch, you're in your local hometown and you're popping out and you're buying stuff for lunches. Yeah. So the cafes, the pubs, the restaurants, yes, and I think that you're seeing a much greater daytime economy happening there, which is really important. Shared workspaces, how could we come up with ideas? And this is why I love, you know, that we sometimes, you trial stuff, you know, why not trial stuff? Why not trial, You know, well, I know Rachel Reeves wanted to open hubs where, you know, you can actually, like banking hubs. Well, don't make them just dry places. They could be banking hubs mixed with some of the post offices that went down, mixed with working spaces. You know, we've got empty stores. I think we lack imagination of what those business models could be.
Have you seen any places that are doing it well? Anywhere we could look at to get a glimpse of how this might work in the future?
Well, I always go back to a place that I love, which is Stroud, which is I think has done some great stuff. There's you know, a guy down there who opened up what was called the Long Table, and it became this. It's a co-working as well now, but it was about people affording to eat round a table. He had this belief that everybody should sit together, whether you afford to eat, and so you can pay it forward, a meal, and then it's become a recycling for kids' bikes, fashion, creches. It's extraordinary. It has events, talks, so it's a constant 24-hour on. They've taken over the old House of Fraser department store. You know, that was a big store sitting in the middle that looked empty and sad, and they look sad. They took that over, and it's been incredible. You know, I did work with a team in Stockport, a young team of lads, their brothers, who went, we've got no fashion here for young people. So they started these markets, they started these fashion markets, and it's just gone across the country, and it regenerated the area, and they absolutely, it's not, we used to have the clone towns at one point. That will never happen again because so many of the big retailers closed their third sites because it was their second door was then the internet. And I think it's about really getting local government, I think, are really important in this. I think you'll know that, you've done that as well. Understanding the needs of those different towns and societies and going, okay, what do we need here? What are the needs? And if you've got somewhere like a Stockport with so many young people with nothing to do, that market just regenerated and it just expanded. So there's lots of different ways that we're seeing, and I think testing a town and putting some of those together, I think would be a very good thing.
I think you're right to point to a role for local government, and you know, my experience of that is that local government needs to open the door for the creativity of their own communities to work out what they want their high street or town centre to look like. So an example of it that I saw close up when I was the leader of a council in South London was Brixton, where the old food market was pretty much dying on its feet. Loads of empty units closing down every month, and it was hollowing out, and it was going to be demolished. A big developer was going to buy it, flatten it, turn it into a clone town, which people didn't want there. They felt their town had a personality and they wanted to keep that identity. So we locally listed it, then working with the owners gave people rent-free access to the space for a few months, and they started up businesses, and people moved in from the street market into these units, set up businesses. The ones that worked continued, they added on to paying rent. Those that didn't moved out. Now it's buzzing, and that really was just opening the door to people.
And you see that in St Catherine's Hill in Somerset, where it's privately owned properties, and he went, okay, I want to make this a thriving place. What that has done for that local economy. So he was a landlord, he owned spaces, he let small businesses come in, he didn't charge them extraordinary rent. The whole thing boosted that town completely. And I'm going to stop. What's the name of that town, Somerset? You know, Frome. So Frome is absolutely buzzing, and you've just got all these families moving there because it's becoming the place. We're doing the same's happening in Stroud. People want to be in these places where there is activity and regeneration. And I go back to local councils. I think you have to. It's a big thing to say to people, what do you want, and get them to organise it. But I think if you look at the way, if A was a shopping mall planning what to put in the old days it would be, okay, let's put this big store Marks and Spencer's at one end, let's put John Lewis at the other, we'll charge them peppercorn rent, and everybody will fill in between. I think the local government needs to do that and think, how do we what are the anchors that we know this town needs, and how do we give them a kickstart? One is if the local councils own the property, or two is, as you've said, work with these landlords and go, come on, help us here, because if we regenerate and you are able to give these businesses decent rent, long term it's going to be beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear from what you're saying that you think footfall is key, getting people into those places, but also making them look better. So there's an awful lot of shops that are just empty and have been empty for years. And if you go and try and find out who owns them, nobody really knows. I think they've been packaged and sold on.
Nightmare.
So we're changing the law so that if a unit's left empty, you can have a compulsory auction, and the community can take control of it that way. Is that a way that we can get communities?
I think honestly, it's a great idea. How long will that be? How would that work? So if it's empty, like I can think of many.
Yep.
How long is it got to be empty for before that goes to the?
I can't remember the exact period. Yeah, I think it's 6 months.
Because that's not long.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
But that and I also love the idea of. I told you about the Made In, where you actually just have all local people's businesses. If it's an empty building, then every small business can have a really good place within there and pay less rent. People organise this themselves sometimes, and I love it. I was doing a big event. I think you came to it, the one that we did at. And there was this girl who had these beautiful leather diamonds. She said, I can't afford to have a shop of my own. So I just found other small businesses and said, do you want to come together? Shall we collaborate together? They've just got this micro store of all of them together, and they're all equal sharing it. And it was just so wonderful. And there's part of that I love, because we're moving away from, we realise that this individualist society is just not good for our well-being, and actually having this is so vitally important.
How does that fit with online retail? If you're going to sell something you're making, there's a much bigger audience online. What's the thing that will attract somebody to want to be part of a maker's unit, a maker's shop in a high street?
Well, we've done enough research on this. So first of all, online, it obviously has been an incredible opportunity for businesses, small businesses to start. It really has been. What we've found is that most businesses, when they get successful online, want a physical space, and here's why. One, we are neurobiologically wired to remember activity that happens physically. It's really important. So customers really remember a brand. Also, seeing a brand or name physically on a high street is really powerful for that brand. Two, it's people love, and brands love that, interacting with people, getting that feedback, seeing who their customers are, understanding, talking to them, socialising with them, which goes deeper roots. And really, at the end of it, most people who start their businesses want to be a shopkeeper. That's what they want. And that becomes the ultimate thing that they do with it. They want to end up doing. So they're using stores very much as social places, places of connectivity, rather than I'm just opening doors to sell more stuff.
Interacting with other human beings.
It's what we all want.
That's what we want. Get away from our devices and get back and.
It's totally where it's going. So I hope you'll tell me more about the Pride in Place, though. So it's a lot of money that you're putting out there. To what?
Well, Pride in Place is a funding scheme the government's introduced that's funding up to £20 million each to just under 300 of our poorest neighbourhoods that feel they've been the most ignored, the most left behind. And the thing that's very different is it's not the government telling people how this money will be spent, or any politicians. There's a neighbourhood board in each of those areas, representative of the community, chaired by a community person, and they choose what they want to spend their money on. And the insight is common sense, really, that local people know best what needs to change in their own area. Now, we've had the first wave of feedback from these Pride in Place programmes, and 70% of them are looking at the high street. What can they do to fix their local high street, bring back the kind of shops or spaces that they feel they don't have anymore? They're doing it all in different ways, which is great, because that means you're going to get innovation and creativity. But it just says something, that the thing that the majority of them were looking to was their high street, and the sense that it had gone into decline, and how could they reinvent it for the future. And people will come up with their own ideas, but it's so important we get a way to share that learning, share that experience, so people can adapt what they see happening in one place and get a version of it that fits for them as well. But it's that thing, it's that centre where everyone can go and everyone can meet, and tells you that there is life and opportunity in this community. People are so broken that that's been taken away, and we can't let high streets die, but we've got to rethink them.
What about some of the big businesses or the big organisations? Like the other day I went and did a talk at the post office, which is obviously, they've been beaten up. And what about them? Is there any deals that you can do as government to them, saying you guys are really important, you know, or even pulling together some sort of partnerships so that we see these guys coming back onto our high streets? I mean, I was reading that T.G. Jones, which we know bought W.H. Smith, is just kicking out a lot of the post offices. And you're like, right, how do you compete with this, you know? And is there any way with big businesses that we can...
There must be a way to do that, particularly with so many units. I think relocating post offices in other stores is great because it gets people coming in who then might buy what's available. But we've got a similar problem with banks. A lot of particularly poorer communities now have no bank, and yet they're the kind of communities where you're going to get more people who are still using cash. So where do you go and bank it? That's a constraint on business. So we need to look at what kind of hubs we can create for people to access those kind of services. I think you're absolutely right, looking at public services, access to health services, more, you know, what we used to call cottage hospitals on high streets, where you're going to go for smaller scale surgery as well, gets people out there. If you're going to go for training for jobs, somebody was talking to me about the idea of apprentice shops. Why can't you have a location which is a space for training particularly young people? We've got so many young people now not on employment, education or training, where they can go and develop the skills they need to get the jobs that are available locally. That there's so much that we can do.
You know the absolute truth though, and I really believe this, and I'd love you to look at this, Steve, because I think it's so vitally important. Big business rarely leads on innovation with small. And I bet you saw that at Brixton. It was the small people that came out, they tested.
Yeah.
Absolutely the same what happened at St Catherine's Hill. The small businesses, and when those small businesses become the sexy destination where people want to eat, in come the big. So my big request to you is, how do we, and this is why I think Rachel Rees needs to look at this, how do we get behind small businesses and give them some tax breaks that really just says, come on, because the enterprise in this country is insane.
Insane. I mean, just in Brixton Market, Franco Manca started in Brixton Market. Now it's a national chain. Honest Burgers started in Brixton Market. Now it's a national chain. That's just one place.
How do we get that? And I've just left the Better Business Act this morning, and we just had these incredible small businesses all come out going, look, I've done this, I'm doing this, Mary. And I'd love that to be part of it. How do we create these places? Like your workshop idea, I like that. How do we create, let's give you a break. And are local governments able to do that? I know that the coffers are pretty empty, but if that's the case, I think that's where this starts.
Completely. I love your excitement about high streets. I think it really matters to people. But Mary Portas, thank you for spending some time with us.
My pleasure, and I got wet in the rain. That's how does the hair look?